You're watching Beyond Markets. Welcome, I'm Esther Awuni. Many thanks for joining us. On today's show, we'll explore fiscal reforms in Nigeria. As always, you can join the conversation with the hashtag Beyond Markets, and you can send tweets to my Twitter handle too, at Esther O. Awuni. Now, the Nigerian Economic Summit Group set up a fiscal policy roundtable to formulate recommendations that will boost government revenues. Now, the chairman of this committee, Sarah Alade, who was also a former acting governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, joins me today to explore ways to drive Nigeria's fiscal reforms. Thank you so much. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show today. Yes. Now, Nigeria's fiscal reforms, fiscal policy, I mean, the World Bank, the IMF have had several comments, several things to say about how Nigeria over the years, successive governments, previous governments, and even this government, how fiscal reforms have been able to drive economic growth. Now, but I'd just like to hear your perspective in terms of, especially from a domestic revenue mobilization angle, how we've fared so far and what the fiscal landscape looks like right now.
Well, thank you, Esther. We have done a lot, but I guess the lot is not enough. We keep working on the fiscal structure of the country so that we can continue to have increased tax revenue mobilization. We have if you look at what we have now, our tax to GDP ratio in Nigeria is just about 4%. Usually, the ERGP of the government, that's our plan, expects that by the year 2020, we should have 15%. There's a research that I think by IMF and the others that says that the tipping point for economic growth between tax and economic growth is about 12%. So for us to be able to experience, significant economic growth, we need to have at least 12%. 15% in the ERGP. Comparator countries, Ghana have 15%. Most others have double digits. We are on 4%. So that shows that there's a lot of room for improvement.
But what would you say has been that one major hurdle, that one problem that has prevented us from achieving that over the years? I mean, we've never had a lack of policies or reforms. I don't know. It's just getting there, moving the needle to achieving that.
I think it's the implementation of some of the recommendations that have been made over the years. We need to be able to implement it consistently so that we can do. And you have, things like the complexity of the taxes, for instance. What do you pay? Who do you pay to? And those on. But, for instance, we have had, now we have taxes being paid electronically. It wasn't like that before. It's led to some significant increase in the taxes we have. But there are other things that ought to be done. And that's why the NESG Fiscal Policy Roundtable came up with, solutions, priorities on what to do. Okay. So that we can move the needle.
I was going to go to this. So let's go straight to that, the NESG Fiscal Policy Roundtable. You're the chairman of that roundtable, and obviously you've looked at how the government has handled fiscal reforms over the years, and of course you've come up with some recommendations. So at what point did you feel like, the NESG felt like it was important to set this up and talk to us, talk to us about, what has been achieved so far? And this was set up in 2018. Mm-hmm. What has been achieved so far?
Mm-hmm. It was set up by NESG in 2018, and is supported by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, as to look at the whole fiscal environment, the fiscal structure, come up with the issues, solutions, and recommendations, policy recommendations that will really significantly move lead to the outcome that we have, so that we can have sustainable development, so that government can have more revenue from taxes rather than this dependent on oil revenue a lot. So that's what's led to it in 2018. And the Fiscal Policy Roundtable has been able to engage in research. We have done analysis of the issues that are, surrounding it. We have come up with recommendations, policy recommendations that we help. We have also done a citizen perception survey, as the citizens, households, as well as small businesses. What is their perception of taxes? These are all results that we do hope will be able to lead to significant achievements.
So in the course of your research, looking at the fiscal environment, the structure, from a structure perspective, what did you find? What do we have on ground, and what do you think perhaps needs to be adjusted?
We have, there are lots of, I said earlier on that we have made some progress in terms of taxes, but we haven't made enough progress. We found that within the tax structure, there are gaps within the administration, for instance, in tax administration, and that's why the performance has been low. You have, people the complexity of taxes, for instance, is one of the hurdles that people have. You have manual, tax filing is still manually done, despite technological advancements in all other areas. You have, a lot of, even tax registration, the data of, people who pay taxes is still not where it ought to be. And these are things that we can improve on to improve performance of taxes.
Now, within this roundtable, there's also the better tax, what you call, the NESG calls the better tax. That's like a campaigning on advocacy tool. Can you quickly tell us about that?
The better tax is what we have done so far, which we put together. Better tax is consists of the issues, the solutions, and priorities, the recommendations that we have made. That is what we call the better tax.
When you embarked on this, did you was the government aware that this was happening, that this is what the NESG was doing in terms of, doing research, looking at the tax structure, what's wrong, what's right, and what could be better, and, expecting that this report would also come out? Did you carry the government along?
Yes, we did, because we have been talking to the Minister of Finance. We have been talking to tax officials. We have been talking to those that matter in government to say that we're doing this. And when it comes out, we will be able to do policy recommendations on it. We have also had the better tax, or the research we have done has also benefited from what IMF has done. We're also looking at what World Bank has done. So it's not like reinventing the wheel. If others have done some aspects, we want to put it together and tell the government that this is the way to go.
But did you find that, for a country like Nigeria, did you find it very peculiar? Was it more difficult because of our structure, maybe the size of the population, the revenue of the structure of the country, and just the revenue base, peculiar revenue base, the fact that we're dependent on oil? Did that make it a lot more difficult in terms of?
Yes, it makes it a lot difficult. And the fact that the citizens, from the perception survey, citizens, the average Nigerian just believe that there's nothing wrong in not paying taxes. Okay, now that
let's go into it. I want it because I thought it was important to read this out. For this research that you did on citizens' perception. Now, first of all, laying that background, the report states that 70 million Nigerians are economically active.
Yes.
20 million Nigerians are registered to pay income tax. However, there are only 10 million active taxpayers. And then for the perception, it says that just what 50. The one that jumped out at me was that 50% of Nigerian individuals believe that it's wrong not to pay taxes, or it's wrong to evade taxes, but it's understandable. 50% of small businesses feel the same way. I think that just captures the entire picture of how, as a country, as a people, we feel about taxes. And I just feel like that just presents an actually, very difficult problem. So where does one start? And you mentioned some positives and some that have come out of some of the tax reforms. And you listed some of the strengths. The fact that taxes are now being, in many places, being paid electronically. The FRS, the LRS, and other states have, are doing their best, as it were, but obviously a lot needs to be done. So starting point, what would be a good starting point?
A good starting point will be education for the taxpayer as well. And simplifying the taxes. You need to simplify the taxes. You need to tell them why they need to pay taxes. Because one of the reasons, if you look at it, one of the reasons why people don't want to pay taxes is because they say they don't see what the government has done for them. But it's an issue of the chicken or the egg. If you don't pay taxes, how can the government have money to do something for you?
Because this is the argument that I hear all the time from even tax experts who know, I mean, obviously, tax experts, and, just from talking to individual Nigerians, and they say, look, take Lagos State, for instance. I'm a worker in Lagos State, and, I do the pay as you earn. For several years, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4 decades, I've been paying taxes. I don't have 24/7 lights. Water is a problem. So many other amenities. So how do you convince that category of people that, okay, you need to pay those taxes before these things are provided, to you? They've been doing it for 30 years, and they don't see something significant.
But if you look at the statistics you just read, how many people actually do that for 30 years? Just the payee. And what's the proportion of that in the country? When you look at other businesses, large businesses as well as small businesses who evade taxes. So we don't really get the amount of money we should get to even make the difference. But on the other hand, you also need to tell the government that the little we get, let's show what we do for it. That we encourage people to pay more taxes.
So I guess, the problem is obviously not enough people are captured. And going back to that data you put out, 70 million Nigerians are economically active. And there's a lot of, a good figure of this is an informal sector. I know that there's a micro, is it a micro tax? And they're just trying to get, those entrepreneurs, those with maybe staff strength of 2 or 3 to pay. But that in itself too has also been a problem. But I'm thinking if that can be captured effectively, obviously that could be a game changer. What steps are being taken to achieve that, to capture this larger number actually who are outside the tax bracket?
Large number. You see, one of the things we're also looking at is that you find that in some other countries, 3% of the population pay about 90% of the taxes. The very, very large businesses. But how many of them in Nigeria actually pay taxes?
Are you referring to the 1%? Because in the Western world, they talk about the 1%, the wealthy.
Whether it's the 1%, whether it's the 3% wealthy, that's also one area that we will have to look at. But for the other average Nigerian, the ordinary Nigerian, the informal sector man, there has to be things put in place. Their registration, they have to be registered to pay taxes. They have to be convinced that it's their civic, it's their responsibility to pay taxes. Okay,
Sarah, I must thank you for your time so far. We're going to pause here and take a short break and come back, pick up from where we left off. I've been speaking to Sarah Alade, Chairman of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group's Fiscal Policy Roundtable and former acting governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria. If you're just joining us, Sarah Alade, Chairman of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group's Fiscal Policy Roundtable, is with me today, and we're exploring ways to drive Nigeria's fiscal reform. Sarah, thank you for your time so far.
Thank you.
Let's pick up from where we left off. Now, part of the recommendations on improving tax collection in the country, the report puts down a number of options. It talks about plug-in revenue leakages, conducting a full review of VAT, VAT costs, and the kind of exemptions that we already have in place, etc. So let's start from here, the tax reform options, as you put it in the report. Plug-in revenue leakages. How big are these leakages that we're talking about here?
It's huge. And you're talking about waivers as well. You're talking about granting exemptions, which we think should be streamlined. These are tax expenditures that need to be streamlined so that it's not just taking away a lot of the revenue that we have. These are monies that can be collected, but you've already given it out as waivers, as taxes, and as so on.
What about what was hoped to get, the commensurate benefits that were hoped to, to be received as,
That's why,
in return for those waivers?
We're not saying that you shouldn't give waivers at all, but it should be streamlined so that you are not giving, even waivers to things that shouldn't have been, to businesses that shouldn't be given waivers to. And it should be something that is then streamlined. It should be something that is then given. If it's the Minister of Finance that gives it, there should be laid down criteria of those who are entitled to it or those who can get it, rather than, ad hoc basis of giving. That's what we're talking about.
Now, one of the other interesting reforms that I saw here was the introduction of a modern VAT, value-added tax, at double the current rate. And I know that obviously would, VAT has been a bone of contention and a controversial issue. And now here the report is recommending double. Talk to us about that.
We're recommending increased rates. Again, we're one of the lowest in the world of taxes. And VAT is one of the easiest to collect because is a consumption tax. But that is not the only thing that the report recommends. It also recommends widening the base and probably setting a threshold too. You don't want to go after very little, to collect 1,500 or something.
So that will come first, widen the base.
So you widen the base, but for the proper things, and then you increase the rates. There are other things in VAT administration that can be done also to plug the leakages in there that will also lead to increase in there. So even if you are not increasing the rates immediately, there are things that can be done to still increase the revenue from there. But it will be necessary at one point or the other to increase that rate.
You think it's inevitable that we will get that?
We don't even have the West African average. It's far more. We're the lowest, I think, within the West African sub-region.
Because I remember, there was, I don't know if it was a speculation, because it was in the news some time ago, and the backlash was amazing. It was just something else. Again, when it was said, we just put out there, so that we might see a VAT, government might increase the VAT or VAT to 10%, and there was just this outcry.
I still think it's because of the trust. If people believe that the money had been used in a transparent manner, there's accountability for it, I don't think that backlash would have happened. You would have been happy to pay, but it's like, why are we paying?
And back to that, I want to take you back to that, the awareness issue. And I remember I was telling you earlier that, for awareness, which is what this report also, recommends, that there's already awareness out there. The FRS will tell you that, look, we're already doing awareness. There are TV commercials, there are radio jingles. Some of our staff, from time to time, we do these road shows where we go out and sensitize, people, tell them why they have to pay their taxes, the fact that it's a civic responsibility, and what the government is doing in return, with their taxes. I know the Lagos State government always says that you see, go around the state, you see those, billboards saying that, look, this is your tax at work. They build a road and they put a sign there and say, this is your tax, taxpayers' money at work. So just get people to know that this is what they actually pay for. But I don't know, what is your is that enough? Just telling the average Nigerian who looks at this TV that, look, it is your civic responsibility to pay taxes, and this is what you get in return.
You remember that when Lagos started all those awareness things, taxes also went up in Lagos. But it's not enough. We just spoke about trust. And if you look at the perception thing, the trust is lacking. People just think that they don't know what government is doing with their taxes. That's also part of the awareness. To know that if I pay 1 naira, if I pay 10 naira, this is where the money goes into. That trust is also important. Okay,
so I'm sorry to butt in. So what would be different with this recommendation that you made on the awareness side of things? What would be different in the message of awareness? Would it be the same message, or would it just be a difference in the frequency of the message?
The frequency of the message and the fact that the government is also doing its own part.
Meaning that the government is going to show more of
the things it's doing. It's going to show more of what it's doing, and then it then becomes more meaningful to say that, look, you ought to be paying taxes, and this is what we're doing. That delivery, that service delivery is important. And we also talked about complexity. The guy there who is not paying taxes or who says there's nothing wrong with tax evasion also needs to know that there's a simple way of paying the taxes. Now they complain about the complexity. Now they complain that they don't even know what they should be paying. The tax official who is also going there to collect the taxes also have problems. They maybe they don't understand. The policies are conflicting, and then what he needs to do.
Is that what you found?
So, and then that's what we found. Okay. That's what we found. And even so, he is also part of the person that will create the awareness on the tax. If he's able to understand, if he's able to, to tell the taxpayer, to explain to the taxpayer why he's paying taxes and what he should be paying, that's part of the awareness. It's not just the billboards. It has to go beyond billboards.
Okay, so I'm just wondering, because, usually reforms like these take years to have, that, impact that government desires, and of course to widen the bracket. And, like a state like Lagos State and even Ogun State have been able to, significantly increase their taxes. But obviously this needs to be widespread. This needs to spread to other states. And most of the time the picture we get is what's happening in Lagos, what's happening in Ogun, or maybe major cities like Abuja and Port Harcourt. Do we know what's going on in other states, and how state governments themselves there what they're doing to increase their tax brackets?
We intend to take this advocacy thing to states, all states of the Federation. So it's not just the federal government that will be talking about taxes. It will be even the low level, the lower tiers of government will also be talking about it. And the awareness, the simplicity, the, removing this multiplicity of taxes and other things should be what will happen between federal as well as state governments. So it will be all over.
So, but would you say that, with some of the reforms, and in fairness, there have been some reforms that have been made that are working, like like as highlighted in the report, especially with the FIRS, for instance, an effective process for gathering intelligence and identifying compliance risks in place. So there's so many of them. But I'm just thinking, do we have a good foundation right now that we can build on? Because obviously this is going to take years, for meaningful impact. So are we on the right path? And in terms of momentum, so is this report hopefully part of the reasons why you put out this report, for us to gather more momentum?
We do. We already have a lot of things that FIRS has done. And what we are saying, what the report is saying, is to build on those ones and then go on and take the next steps to do. So there's already a foundation. There are leakages, there are weaknesses in what we have now, and we're saying let's plug leakages. Let's build on it. Let's increase the momentum so that, revenue from taxes can improve.
But in the meantime, the government needs money now. So, I need to take years for this to have some meaningful impact. The government needs money now. Recurrent, especially capital expenditure, we never have enough. The deficit that keeps climbing, as it were. And there's still that, trying to achieve that balancing act between the fiscal authorities and the monetary authorities. You as a former acting CBN governor and also a member of the MPC, you know what that's been like, trying to, especially on the monetary side, trying to manage, as it were, the fiscal side of things, with inflation, money supply, and, the structural imbalances. And over the years, the central bank, and especially recently, has had to come up, almost play the role of the fiscal authorities, coming up with all kinds of intervention schemes, especially in the agriculture sector, the labor-intensive sectors. Just speak to that point, the struggles of the government with fiscal, with revenue mobilization now, especially to fund the yearly budget, one, and on the other side, how the monetary authorities are also managing the situation, as it were.
I think, if we are able to get this up, and government is able to implement most of the recommendations that we have, tax revenue will increase. And if tax revenue increases, it's one less headache for the monetary authorities. You then don't bother about how to finance government deficit. You don't bother about even the banks finance government by buying the treasury bills and so on. And money that should have gone into small and medium scale enterprises, money that should have gone to the private sector, is also diverted into government bonds and yields. So if this works, and I know it will work, and I know that we will continue to talk to the government, and I know the government also wants to increase revenue from that side, then a lot of what we have in the financial market should sort themselves out. Monetary policy will then be easier to implement than what we have. Every time you keep having, the central bank coming out to say that, banks should give private sector credit.
And this time, just at the last minute, sorry to butt in, the central bank governor came out, sounding even more tougher. The rhetoric was, tougher this time. That look, we're going to move against banks and not give them unlimited access to government securities. I don't know how that's going to work, but
that is it. But if government already has money from increases its own tax revenue, why will government then be funded by the banks? Why will government, so even if banks are going to be subscribing to, they are going to be buying treasury bills, they are going to be financing government budget deficit. It will not be to the extent to which we have it today. It's gradual. I mean, it's not going to happen in 1 year, but the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a step. Let's start today.
Okay.
And then we know it's going to happen.
Fingers crossed, and of course, all the best with this, and hoping that we'll see some meaningful impact going forward. Thank you so much, Sarah. It's been an absolute pleasure having you as our guest today.
Thank you very much.
I've been speaking to Sarah Alade. She's the chairman of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group's Fiscal Policy Roundtable and former acting governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria. But that's it on Beyond Markets. Thank you so much for being a part of it. Remember, you can watch the show at 5 p.m. West African time daily and have access to all previous episodes of the show on our website. That's cnbcafrica.com. You can also stay engaged with the hashtag Beyond Markets. And of course, you can follow my Twitter handle too at Esther O. Awuni. From myself and the team, it's bye for now.